Hello everyone and welcome to another interview here at the Musica Sacra project. If you like this content, please share, like, subscribe and comment with your thoughts, and I will endeavour to continue to do these interviews as long as feasibly possible. Secondly, the Musica Sacra project is entirely funded by your support. If you like this content, please consider donating via the website page, or otherwise subscribing to the new library access for a small subscription fee each month, and this makes the project really sustainable. Now please sit back and enjoy this interview. Today I have with me Rachael Shipard. She's a fellow Australian, a wonderful Catholic friend of mine, and also a phenomenal musician. Rachael studied at the Conservatorium of Queensland. She did her bachelor's and master's in Brisbane in Australia, and then jumped across the pond and finished her doctoral studies in London at the Guildhall School of Music and Performing Arts. And now she is also the choir director at St Dominic's Parish in London, also known as the Rosary Shrine. And she is a devoted mother, wife, and a good friend. And thank you so much, Rachael, for being with me.
Hi, Grace. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it was really good to see you a few weeks ago in London, and now we're having this opportunity to finally do an interview together, so it's good.
Yeah.
I have a question before we get into the real stuff. How did you hear about me? Because we had a mutual friend that mentioned you once, Father Lawrence Lou, and he says, I know two Australians, and he mentioned one, and I said, yes, I know that person, and then he mentioned you, and I'm like, I don't know her. I need to meet her one day. I'm not sure if he did that with you, but...
Yeah, I think Father Lawrence definitely mentioned you at some point, but also I knew your brother from Brisbane, from the Brisbane Oratory. So I knew the surname, but I didn't know that he had siblings or anything.
Yeah,
And
that's
I definitely
true.
didn't know that he had a sister in Portugal. So yeah, but I think Father Lawrence definitely mentioned. And then I saw your name with the workshops that you were doing at the Rosary Shrine with the Polish Dominicans. So
Yeah,
yeah, we've had a
yeah.
little bit of overlap there.
That's right, that's right. Shout out to the Oratorians in Brisbane and all the
Yeah.
people that go there. I forgot that as well, yes. So I guess starting with back in Australia, I feel like our stories are quite similar in how we found ourselves in sacred music and doing that. So could you maybe talk about firstly your sacred music experience there, and then we'll also delve into your other musical endeavors. But where
Yeah.
did you start learning Catholic music and discovering this heritage that we have?
Yeah. So I've been a cradle Catholic, so been going to mass my whole life, but I started kind of contributing to the music of the parish that I was at when I was around 13. My parish priest just kind of encouraged me. He knew that I played the piano, and he said, well, why can't you just play the hymns at mass? And I was like, okay. So I didn't know anything about the pedals. I didn't really know anything about organ technique either. I just was helping out by playing the hymns. So that's when I started like attending choir rehearsals and seeing how it all happened behind the scenes. And then there was at my cathedral, St. Stephen's Cathedral, there was the old director of music who's now passed away, Dr. Ralph Morton. He was doing kind of like organ taster sessions on Saturday mornings where he would kind of, yeah, you'd go to the cathedral, he would explain the organ, and it would be like basically group lessons. And so you'd get to see other, and it was for all ages. I think there were even like adults there, and you'd get to kind of try out the organ, try out just like simple exercises and things. So I did that, and that was funded by my parish to go and kind of learn more about the organ. That was with the same parish priest as well. So yeah, I did that, and that's kind of what got me into actually understanding that the organ is a very different instrument to the piano, not just because of the pedals, but because of everything else that goes with it. So yeah, I did that, and then yes, I kept on getting more and more interested in like the musical history of the church, and then I discovered the oratory, which had just been set up,
Mhm.
and then was kind of getting involved in more music, something called Gregorian chant, and I had never heard of that before. And I was like, wait a second, this is supposed to be like the music of the church. Apparently, it's been around for centuries. I only hear this in like soundtracks to movies or whatever. I didn't really know that this was something that was actually sung day in day out, and it's still being used. And I was like, well, okay. So then I started like listening to that and trying to figure that out. Started getting interested in like organ accompaniment to chant as well. And then yeah, I applied for the organ scholarship at St. Stephen's Cathedral. And so that's kind of what got me more invested in not only Gregorian chant but also discovering polyphony. So I'm a pianist mainly, but I didn't really know anything pre-Baroque or Renaissance music. I didn't really understand that music came predominantly from vocal music. Like that's kind of how the idea of Western music started, and then the role of the keyboard kind of, it didn't just supersede the voice, but it kind of entered the music scene only with the Baroque period, basically. So I didn't really understand any of that background. So yeah, when I became organ scholar and then got more involved with the music at the cathedral, that's when I was like, okay, there's a whole like patrimony of Catholic music that a lot of parishes, whether it's just out of ignorance or just not wanting to engage with this kind of music, but there's this whole stack of music that really needs to be promoted and should be sung regularly, and it's for the same mass, even if it's the pre-Vatican II or post-Vatican II mass, it can be used in both situations. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of my Australia background. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so similar to mine, I guess, just from a vocalist perspective. Even though I did piano, I'm terrible at piano these days compared to you. But that was the doing your basic Bachelor of Music, I guess, discrediting our studies because they have formed us to be who we are. But there was just this no talk before the Renaissance and going, actually, like ancient music is where everything starts, and chant is exactly where it starts for Western art music that we do today. Playing Rachmaninoff is sort of actually just a long line from that, and I think that's where we may have missed it. And then joining cathedrals and working in the church, that starts connecting the dots, and then we're like, oh my goodness. And knowing that there's so much structure to sacred music for the Mass, pre or post Vatican II, and I think that's what you're speaking. So we're on both different sides of the country, but experiencing it and having this like revelation, and then being able to try and carry that on now and like pass it on passionately to other people. So yeah, it's really good. And what did you do for your master's study at the conservatorium? What were you kind of focusing on at that time? And then we'll jump across to London, but prior
Yeah.
to that.
So my master's was a master's of music research. So I had to submit a thesis as well as give a recital. And my research was in different kinds of piano techniques and comparing writing and also performances relating to, not only, I was brought up in the Russian piano technique. Just I had a Russian piano teacher both before the conservatorium and while I was at the conservatorium. So I was kind of comparing different techniques against what I had learned already. So it was still very piano based because I wanted to still be honing my craft in piano, which I still continue to do. But then when I moved over to London for Guildhall, I became interested in like kind of classical piano improvisation, which again is something that stemmed from vocal improvisation with chant, and kind of it's got something called cantare supra librum. I don't know if I'm saying that properly, but it's kind of singing from the book but improvising polyphonic lines around what is written in the graduale or whatever chant book you are using. So, but my doctorate was more focused on classical piano improvisation. So, for example, improvising with ornamentation on repeats of like Bach sarabands or minuets or any Baroque dance movements, and then moving into kind of Mozart cadenzas, writing my own cadenzas, and then also moving into the 19th century, where it became more a kind of framework, an improvisational frame of reference from which I still performed the notes on the page, but in terms of interpretation and the way that I kind of communicated to the audience, it was more in an improvisational way rather than planning everything beforehand and then kind of just delivering what I had practiced in the practice room.
Mm.
So yeah, it kind of spanned multiple centuries, but yeah, it was focused on piano improvisation.
I think that's so fascinating that it's, even though it's different from the vocal experience that you've been learning, they're so connected, because I feel exactly the same now when I'm looking at Bach or something. I've even just the other day I was listening to a recording of a Bach aria from a cantata, and the soprano sort of just sang like a, I'm not sure, like a robot, just trying to get the notes out, get them out fast, keep them light. And I was like, I don't think Bach was a robot. Like, I think there should be more in this and more interpretation, musical interpretation, and understanding that his musical style could have been very similar to, I don't know, like a 19th, 20th century composer, as in the emotion, not the compositional style. And then that is also very similar to maybe 1,000 years prior, and that we actually have a continuity of interpretation as a human, as opposed to reading the notes on the page and like, well, in this era we do this, because I feel like that's taking the human element out of every single composer through all the centuries. And so I've got like, when you learn about the extemporization on the organ, or how we ornament chant, especially if you look across to France and what they're really researching into. And then, you know, now looking at a Mozart aria or Bach aria or a piece of music, go, how are these connected as opposed to how are they separated? So I think that that's really, really fascinating. And that's, I feel like, where I'm leaning as well. And I think it's really beautiful to do it on the piano, because that is my second love as well. So really nice. I don't think we've actually talked about that in depth. So that was really nice to have that discussion. We're normally catching up and asking about what's going on with life. So yeah, I really appreciate that. And then, so when you went to London, it was a bit of a difficult time, I think, a bit of the COVID travel confusion and things like that. But did you get to delve into sacred music alongside your studies, or were you adapting and learning to live in the big city? When did you get to sort of start doing sacred music in London?
Probably post-COVID, so 2021. So like I started my doctorate in September 2019, and then of course COVID came. So I was only in the city for 6 months, and then I had to fly home. But I was still continuing my doctorate, but just from abroad. But thankfully I had already made some connections through those 6 months of just trying to make some Catholic friends, going to whatever events I could. So I had already met some people, which was really nice, because I continued to stay in contact with them like through prayer calls and just whatever. If you probably remember back in COVID, people were just kind of like yearning for some sort of human connection. So yeah, I kept in touch with those people then. And then in 2021, when I moved back in August, one of my friends, his friend was looking for an organist for a parish in Richmond. And so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So yeah, then that's when I started getting back into sacred music in the UK. So that was, 2021. I stayed there for 3 years. And then I moved to the Rosary Shrine. So yeah.
And I guess that's what I'm wanting to like delve into now, is the Rosary Shrine. It's a place that I think we both love very dearly, individually and together. And you are sort of the choir director there. You've been working very hard at building up some sacred music. Could you give us like a general overview, before I delve into things, of what's going on there each Sunday and each month with the music?
Yeah, so there's multiple masses across the each weekend which involve music. I'm involved in the 12 p.m. solemn mass on the Sunday at the 5 p.m. Dominican Rite. There's also another choir, the Filipino choir, which sings I think once a month at the 6 p.m. vigil mass. There's a 10 a.m. family mass which has other musicians involved. So there's lots of other music going on. But yeah, I'm the choral director for the 12 o'clock mass, which is solemn mass. So that involves singing quite a bit of Dominican chant, which is kind of unique, of course, to the Rosary Shrine being run by the Dominicans. So we sing at least three bits of chant each Sunday. And then we do at least one motet and a hymn and responsorial psalm, etc. And usually a polyphonic mass setting. So that happens every Sunday at the 12 o'clock, and then at the 5 o'clock it's always a sung mass. It's a Latin mass, so it's actually using a very old missal. It's not even the 1962 missal because the Dominicans use an older missal.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a Latin mass, so everything needs to be sung, all of the chant propers. And then
All or
once a month,
nothing. That's how
yeah,
it works.
basically, yeah. And then once a month, I run a volunteer polyphonic choir, which sings a polyphonic mass setting and two motets, in addition to all of that chant that happens, yeah, once a month at the 5 p.m.
So good. And
Yeah.
was any of that established before you went to the Rosary Shrine?
So I think the 12 o'clock choir has been running for a long, long time. I think it's kind of had like peaks and troughs depending on who comes and goes, but it was very kind of volunteer focused. So of course you can't really, we all love volunteers, but they're volunteers. So they have the total right to come and go as they please. But sometimes that can affect the stability of the choir. So I came in 2024 as the choral director, and I really wanted to have choral scholars. I wanted to establish like a choral scholar scheme. This is something I was inspired by working at the Richmond Church, St. Elizabeth of Portugal. They have choral scholars, and I thought it was done very well. And so I wanted to kind of set something up that was similar to that at the Rosary Shrine. And so I wanted to encourage young singers to come forward who it could have been little to no experience of a Gregorian chant or some experience. I didn't mind, but I really wanted to kind of introduce singers who might be having kind of a traditional conservatoire performance education, learning kind of operatic singing, even if they were singing in a Baroque style. It was the choral singing is quite divorced from an operatic style. So I wanted to kind of give singers an opportunity to look into church music, especially Catholic music, which isn't as well advertised as Anglican music in this country. So yeah, it's been running for 2 years now. I've definitely learned a lot from it, but I think the choral scholars as well, they come in and some of them have absolutely no experience of singing chant before. They could obviously read music. They're all very good at reading modern notation music, but after a whole year of singing week in, week out, even for some extra services, like whatever feasts, first class feasts or solemnities that need to be sung for, they kind of step in and usually cantor them on their own. They've definitely kind of taken on this understanding of plain chant, and that's where, as we said earlier, music really started.
Yeah, I think that's something that I'll just highlight before we continue on, is that you can have an amazing singer, and I've talked to dear friends in London who dep and fill in for various parishes, but going from the Anglican services, you just read your general music of the modern notation, but then to fill in or to dep for a Catholic church, and they're like, oh, but the chant is so confusing. So you can have highly skilled singers who are phenomenal sight readers, but when chant comes along, they sort of do take a step back in humility, saying that's still something that I do have to get my head around, and it's not something that just naturally clicks for them that they can just switch across to it. It takes a little bit of unlearning or relearning to sing chant and to sight read chant with just a different lens. And now, having been the one learning it and now the one teaching it, I wouldn't say it's harder or more difficult, like one is harder or one is easier. I think they're just slightly different, and we just have to take it at a different approach of not the standard key signatures and clefs, etc. But I think that that's really a great approach with the schola at the Rosary Shrine, is that you're trying to encourage chant even to proficient musicians, and so that we, I guess, remove this strange stigma about it and this ancient music world that is maybe unapproachable or different. So,
Yeah,
and
there's
through
less
that,
lines. There's less lines in chant. There's only 4 instead of 5. It's
yeah,
easier.
it's easier, it's more simple, guys. Yes, I think that's really great. And also, there's that beautiful opportunity for singers to attend Mass and to be singing in a choir and to experience that liturgy. That is done so beautifully at St. Dominic's, as compared to other ones. I've been to several of their Masses of all the Sundays when I visit. And yeah, it's just really beautiful. So yeah, I think that's really commendable. I know it's difficult. Sometimes we have to find that funding for scholars, but it is a long-term phenomenal investment to a parish that you can have, even among a volunteer choir, like 4 strong scholars, which is, I think, what we should specify you're trying to do as well. You do allow other people to sing, but you keep your 4 scholars as the core. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's really important to build up choirs that are a mix of kind of amateur volunteer singers with singers that want to be professionals or professional singers already. I know that in places like Westminster Cathedral or St. Paul's Cathedral or the Brompton Oratory, it's just one big professional choir basically. But I think realistically in many parishes that aren't kind of the big names, they need to be supporting the parishioners there that want to do the singing, but they also need some sort of expertise from singers that are taking that as their profession. So I think it's really important to kind of blend those two together, especially in Catholic singing, because as we're noticing, there's definitely a revival in faith and also this love for music, like what you're doing, that wouldn't have been around like 30 years ago. There was definitely a very different type of Catholic music happening then, and so I think because we have all of this revival, we need to be able to cross paths between amateur and professional and be able to speak to both of those types of people and involve everyone as much as you can. Like I do have services, for example, Father Joseph, he's the parish priest. He set up something very good, which is called the healing service. It's a Eucharistic healing service with individual benedictions for each person. There's prayers that are taken from like the exorcism prayers. There's prayers to kind of grow in each of the gifts of the Holy Spirit against the 7 deadly sins. And it's done very well. In those services, I only have the scholars singing for that. So there are opportunities for the scholars to sing in consort settings where it's just the 4 of them. Sometimes I have extra singers in so we can do kind of a bit more complex music. It's more than 4 voices. But on Sundays, I think it's really important, especially at that main mass, to involve both Catholic volunteers who are there to participate in the Mass anyway, as well as the scholars.
Yeah. And from my choral experience, I went in when I was a student to a choir where I felt like I was there to learn. And there was someone next to me that was stronger at sight reading and just learning how to blend with the choir, etc. And that influenced my musicality, I was a good singer, let's be clear, but that sort of sense of confidence and musicianship really grew when you are placed in a choir that's just slightly better than you, and you then understand how to grow in that. And now, as a rehearsal leader, and I sing next to sopranos that need me, they can hear what they're aiming for next to that strong singer. So it's incredibly practical to build the choir. And then I think
Yeah.
it's very beautiful that the healing service gives those singers who are of a more professional nature to, really hone their art and become this lovely consort group and create that sound that I guess choral singers are striving for as well. So it's a very beautiful balance. But I know it does come with its what's the word, struggles, and you've put so much energy into it every single week. I'm there, I've seen you working very hard and being a part of that. What is some of the I guess, unexpected hurdles that you've learnt in the past, like 2 years, that, you could now pass on to other people that have got this idea of building a choir in their church, trying to make it the very best that they can with what they have? And what are some things that you've learnt that you could pass on to us?
Yeah. So there's multiple aspects of running a choir that I've discovered. It's not just turning up and kind of waving your hands, which I'm still learning how to do as a conductor, but it's also all of the planning beforehand, making sure that you're going to have enough voices on the day. I would probably say that the 5 p.m. monthly polyphonic choir is more of something that I really started from ground zero, because I started that in 2020 two or three, I can't remember. I think it was 2022. Yes, 2022. And I just put this idea forward to Father Lawrence, who was the parish priest at the time. I said, do you think I can just try putting singing polyphony at the 5 p.m.? Because we have a handful of people who sing the chant, but what if I just tried to do some polyphony? What do you think? And he's like, okay, you give it a go. And so I managed to just pull whoever just my friends and acquaintances. I just said, just come along, let's just see what we can do. And that was real where I really started. That was before I even had scholars. So that was literally just volunteers and of all like mixed abilities and everything. And we got it. We did it on Trinity Sunday. That was our first mass, and we got through it. And it was, yeah, it was pretty cool because I never envisaged myself to be able to like run a choir myself. I'm a pianist. That's what I've been doing my whole life. I've also learnt the organ. I also play the violin, but I never thought that I would be running a choir. And so then it's kind of just built from there. There would be some days where I would have to change the music on the day because I didn't have the right set of singers for the music that I had planned. Sometimes the printer would break down and I'd have to like go and print externally, or people have to ask like people to bring iPads or whatever. So there's just lots of little things that you just kind of like administrative things that come with running a choir. And then also with the music selection, kind of finding music that is suitable, again with this bridge between amateur and professional music that's going to challenge the amateur but also be comfortable for the professional to sing and not be too boring for them. And then going back to singing Dominican chant, how are you going to encourage both the upper voices, the women, and the lower voices, the men, to be confident at singing? So sometimes I split up the cantoring duties for that so that people can, and sometimes I even ask volunteers to cantor, so it's not just kind of like scholars only. I really want to encourage volunteers to also feel confident that they, because some of them are very good, they just don't do music as their profession, but they learnt music all through their childhood. They just don't want to take the risk of being a musician, which I think is actually a very smart choice. And they work a nice normal office job that pays them monthly, and they have a nice life. But I think they definitely should be encouraged to do as much cantoring or whatever they can to assist in the mass. So yeah, I think there'll be some of the struggles. Also, just like managing on the day your rehearsal, managing your expectations as well for the mass. Like, it's not going to be something that's like voces 8, stile artico recording level with 1 hour or less of a rehearsal. It's
Have
just,
people
that's just not.
practiced, all of these questions?
Yeah. So you need to kind of take that into account and just be like, okay, we need to be realistic about what we can achieve and what's the most efficient way of doing that. Just kind of, yeah, working out rehearsal techniques to make everyone feel happy. It's a Sunday as well. It's not really meant to be something that's like super grinding and like difficult to do. It's meant to be something that you're giving glory to God through with your talents that you have. So yeah, it's just I've learnt that over. I'm still figuring this out, kind of trying to strike a balance between doing the work, which is the music and putting it together and singing it and being able to get it done smoothly during the mass without any kind of hiccups, but also seeing it as a work for God rather than just something that is kind of trying to boost my ego or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and striving for beauty the best way that we can with what we have. Sometimes it's not going to be voces 8, but it can still be beautiful and lead people to prayer. And I think that's what you're trying to come to. And we have to keep our eyes on the prize, which is, giving glory to God, leading others to prayer, and then
Yeah.
trying to make it excellent in the best way possible that we can each
Yes.
Sunday.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
staying reverent as well, like not just kind of making it a performance. It's very difficult to put a label on what you're actually doing when you're doing church music, because you're not really performing,
Yeah.
but you're not kind of just sitting back and not performing. So I don't know. I haven't really
I wish
decided.
we had like this. We need this other word, like execution
Yeah.
of music or something. We
Well,
don't
it
have a
sounds a little
word.
bit
It
sounds a
sounds
little bit
terrible.
French Revolution. Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, I struggle, especially doing the interviews. Like, I can't say perform. What can I say? Because we're still using our instrument, etc. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad you highlighted that. It is a complicated, just trying to find the right word to show what we do in the Mass. Because, yeah,
Hmm.
it's like a battle in my head as I talk to
Hmm.
people. And I think the last thing I'd like to talk about, because of your so much experience at the Rosary Shrine, is the Dominican Rite, and to ask you as a musician, talking to other musicians, what makes it different than if I just sang for a general Tridentine Mass? What could we expect as a musician going in there that we would need to sort of have our awareness about that's different, something that we would need to adjust or relearn or something? What would you say?
Yeah, probably the first thing that you would notice, even if you were just in the pews, would be like the responses, such as Et cum spiritu tuo. They are all in the Dominican rites. They're all semitones rather than tones, so it's a little bit off-putting at the beginning. But yeah, that's kind of the first thing that will jump out. And I have singers that regularly sing for both the Roman Rite and the Dominican Rite, and they will still mix up the responses, because it's so easy to just go between the two. And not only the Et cum spiritu tuo, like for example, the response to the Our Father, so Libera Noster Malo, is different. The preface dialogue before the preface, the Habemus ad Domino and everything, that is all different as well. So that's the first kind of thing that anyone, even without a musical background, they'll be like, well, okay, this is a bit different. And then in terms of like singing Dominican chant, it's all in a different book. It's in the Dominican Graduale. They still have the same chant propers, the introit, the gradual, which they call the responsorium. The introit they actually call the officium, but the gradual they call the responsorium. Alleluia is still the Alleluia, offertorium, and communio. So there's still 5 chant propers every
Mhm.
week that you need to sing. The ordinary, so like the Kyrie, the Gloria, Sanctus, Agnus, and all that is also different. So it's different from your normal Mass 1, Mass 2 in the Roman Rite. And then there's just a few other things. Father Matthew Jarvis, who's actually the prior of the Rosary Shrine, St. Dominic's Priory, he's doing a PhD at the moment in Dominican chant, and he wants to put together like a handbook on how to sing it to make it more accessible for people in other Dominican priories and lay people to be able to sing this kind of chant, because it is slightly different from Gregorian chant. There's more of an emphasis on the words rather than so much of a melismatic interpretation, which we find in a lot of Gregorian chant. That's not to say that Dominican chant doesn't have that, but I think it's more focused on getting to the point of the words rather than enjoying the beauty of the rises and the falls of the chant itself.
Mm.
And there's a few other like tiny technical things, like for example, when you put a flat on the notation at the beginning of the stave, it kind of lasts for the whole line rather than just lasting for the note that you need it for. So it's just small things like that, but it's quite easy to get used to. You just, once you know kind of the basics. There's one more thing, like when you have kind of breath marks, or they're not necessarily breath marks all the time, but like the vertical lines, there's different lengths and they kind of signify different things. So when it's a very small vertical line, you don't necessarily have to breathe there. It's more of kind of a pause where you lengthen the notes before the line and then you kind of keep going without a breath. But that's kind of up to the singer's discretion as well. If you don't have many people in the group that you're singing with, or if you're cantoring alone, if you need to take a breath, you should take a breath. But if you've got a lot of people that you can kind of stagger things out, then you can afford longer phrases and things, and you can focus on more of an emphasis on the right syllables of the Latin and everything. So yeah, that would be kind of musically that they are the differences for the Dominican Rite. There are some liturgical differences as well, but we don't need to go into that.
Yeah,
Leave
they're all
leave that
very
for the liturgists.
yeah. They're very small because I've sung the Dominican Rite with you. There's just very slight differences, but they can catch you out, if you are in the choir. And I know you just said, listen to the others, follow carefully, like try that. And I was, but I think it's so beautiful that it's trying to be like preserved and continued. I do want to talk to Father Matthew. We've had big discussions about it personally, but I'd love to, if he ever gets that handbook out, that the public can have as well. I'm not sure, then I would love to talk to him about it. So it's really great you mentioned that. So yeah, I think it's unique, and if you can, if you are visiting London, Sundays at 5 p.m., they do the Dominican Rite religiously, and yeah, to come along and to experience that and all the beautiful facets of the Catholic Church, this being one of them. That is, it's kind of a rare unicorn thing, but you do find it, and I think they're really trying to encourage it more within the order as well. So that's exciting.
Yeah, there's just one other thing I wanted to say, which is we have quite a few priests in the priory that can actually say the Dominican Rite. And so last month and a few months back on Laetare Sunday, and coming up on the 21st of June and on the 19th of July, we're going to be having a high mass at the 5 p.m., which means it's a pontifical high mass with the priest, a deacon, and a subdeacon. And if you've never seen that before, you should definitely come and check it out because it's very cool. There's not really much change to the music, but the liturgical aspect of things, the way that the epistle is sung and the gospel, and just kind of all of the beauty and the reverence that is given to the Blessed Sacrament in the Mass is very much elevated in the High Mass. So yeah, that's definitely something that the Father Matthew and Father Joseph, who I mentioned earlier, are really pushing, and also Father Thomas Crean, who says the Dominican Rite as well. So yeah, it's really a unique thing that nowhere else in London has. So yeah.
Yeah, it's so exciting. And to clarify for people that may not know, Missa Cantata and a High Mass are different. So that's what kind of Rachel is referring to. The High Mass is what they are going to have, but they do a Missa Cantata every Sunday. So
Yeah.
I think we confuse the two, and people sometimes think they're the same. So just to separate them.
Yeah.
And I guess it's been really great talking to you. I wanted to ask a more personal question because I'm curious, and I'm sure other people would appreciate it. As a choir director and also as a pianist, what are some of the composers that you are really enjoying just at the moment or this year for both the two aspects of your life, like choir and Catholic music and piano?
Yeah, okay. Well, piano has taken a little bit of a backseat since I've had a baby, which has been a big part of my life. But I still managed to get quite a bit of practice in. But I would probably say I love Bach and Beethoven. They're just like my favorites, and Rachmaninoff as well. But I'm not playing any Rachmaninoff at the moment. I kind of went through a bit of a Chopin phase last year just because of the Chopin competition. I was inspired to learn some extra Chopin just to add to my repertoire. In terms of like choral music, what would I say? I'm discovering. I of course love all of the Renaissance composers, all the big names. I sing with the Southwell Consort also on Monday nights at Corpus Christi Maiden Lane, and they always manage to unearth some very unheard of Renaissance composers as well. And so I just love discovering new names through that. Like this is probably for the people who are like seasoned choral singers, they've definitely heard of people like William Cornish or like Villette or people like that, but I hadn't heard of them until a few years ago, and so I just enjoy singing a lot of different types of choral music. At the moment, I recently found this guy called Fernand Laloux. and he was French, but I think he spent a lot of time in London in like the mid 20th century, and he wrote this set of benediction music for Farm Street Church, which is the Jesuit church in central London. And I found this Tantum Ergo recently, which is just really nice. So highly recommend. But I haven't heard anything else of his. There's another really cool French composer which seems to have only have written one piece of sacred music, which is another Tantum Ergo, which is de Séverac, Théodat de Séverac. I think he was earlier 20th century, but that's another great piece. So yeah, I like to just kind of unearth just random composers. But yeah, I can't ignore Victoria. Like I definitely think he's my favorite Renaissance composer.
Yeah, well, he's a classic, isn't he? I think that's
Yeah.
wonderful. You've got like what it's like this across Europe. You find this music, you know where they were working or doing the mass each week. These composers, because they often worked for the church, and then you can actually go to the church that they maybe intended this music to be performed
Yeah.
in. They were, living there, and that's what was in their headspace as they're composing. And I think that's so beautiful to be able to bring that together, or to be in London singing, this fine music composed in London. So I think it's just such a gift that I think musicians should have that opportunity to embrace if they can, and go to those places, hear the acoustic, understand the space and what was going on, at the time. So yeah. Well, thank you. That was really, you delved
No
right
worries.
well in, and you mentioned the Southwell concert as well. Like plug them, we've plugged everyone today. So do check them out as well. So thank you, Rachel, so much for your time. I know it's quite a hectic time for you at the moment, so I do really appreciate this time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge in such a humble capacity of all the great things you are actually striving to do as a Catholic and as a musician, and just taking up this call to support the church as much as possible. So I really appreciate it. And I look forward
No
to seeing you.
worries.
I look forward to seeing you personally in London very soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Grace. Yeah, I'll see you soon. Yeah.